I am so excited to bring on stage a group of folks who have deep expertise in creativity, human ingenuity, and how this intersection of humans and work go together. So, Jamie has put together a really incredible closing session. They will tell you a little bit about themselves, but this is folks from Pixar. Jamie was written up in Creativity Inc. Have you read Creativity Inc. about Pixar? Yeah, well, a little less than I was expecting, actually. Interesting. But Pixar is known, of course, as one of the most creative and ingenious storytelling engines in the world today. So we're going to be hearing stories about that. And please stand up and let's give a very warm welcome to the stage to these incredible four: Danielle, Ashley, Chris, and Jamie. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Bell. I'm the president of Creativity Partners. And here's what I want to do. I'd like for you to think for a second about this. It is 4:19 on a Wednesday. You gave up 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock today to come here and do this. If this was any other Wednesday, 4:19 in the afternoon, what would you be doing? How would you spend this hour from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock on a Wednesday? It's the end of the day. You about 40 minutes from knocking off, hopefully. And the fact that some of you laugh already tells me a little bit about how you would spend this hour. How would you spend this hour if you weren't here? Think about that for a second. How we spend our time is so important. It's so important to us as a culture. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about that, thinking hard about time as a commodity. Today, we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. I'm going to pass it over to Ashley.
Great. So the last time that I thought about this question of whether I was spending my hour in the right way was when I was about to write a case study on being efficient with time and micromanaging every second to get the most and best productive use out of every single second in a day. As I was running down kind of the long stairway to meet my student with my laptop in hand, my student stops me and says, "My professor just had a heart attack in the middle of class." We put our books, our briefcases away, and we walked the campus instead, in silence. Not trying to be efficient with our time allowed us to pause, take in that moment, and connect. And to ask ourselves whether we were really spending that hour in the right way on a regular Wednesday, typing frantically in our office about how to be efficient and productive. And the irony is not lost on me because I studied time poverty for a living. I study the psychological experience of feeling overwhelmed by the demands of work and life. I know from my data that when we feel overwhelmed by the demands of work and life, irrespective of how many hours we work, we spend less time connecting, we have lower quality social relationships, and we're rated by our bosses as less productive and creative. I know these things from my research, and yet I still, on a daily basis, struggle at times to put them into practice. So I hope what we can do a little bit of today is to draw the connection between time expansiveness as a psychological idea, something that we can, no matter how busy we are, take the space, take the time to create for ourselves, both so that we can connect, but also so that we have the space and time to innovate.
And part of why I am so thrilled to have Ashley beside me is somehow we connected, and I had the joy of helping her students, who are very stressed out humans, share stories with each other and draw. And you could see how armored up they were because of all the image management they have to do as Harvard business students. And yet, it took maybe a few minutes for them to start to laugh. Some of them cry as they told stories of their neighborhoods, stories of their uh, exam, stories of their friendships. And so to have Ashley here, who's done so much deep research, we wanted to frame our conversation, which will be very free flowing and unscripted, which makes me sweat a little bit. But we're going to go with it. We only have a half an hour, so we thought let's have the conversations that we always have. And so, Ashley, if you could just frame for us some of the research that's most relevant for our conversation.
Yeah, so I've already outlined the fact that the majority of working adults report experiencing high levels of time stress. And I want to move the conversation. It's not just an individual problem, but an organizational and societal one. So we're often rewarded based on number of hours worked or this image management that you talk about, this sense of having to always be responsive as a proxy for commitment. Even if w- we don't even if our organizations say that they don't care about that, often we get different signals. And we are also averse to idleness. We like to feel productive. We get social status and confer social status on others who never seem to have a spare moment available. And what I like to think about is how we can reframe the conversation to legitimate rest and to celebrate leisure, to celebrate those moments of connection. So I do a lot of research looking at organizational policies and practices that we can put into place. And some of those might look like sabbaticals or maker weeks, but some of them are simply letting a free flowing conversation. I saw some people dancing outside. Maybe we should have some more dance parties at the end of our team stand up. Allowing these informal conversations at the end of virtual meetings, allowing kind of teams to talk about their personal success and also challenges through personal KPIs as opposed to just professional ones. So I'd also love to hear, in addition to what some of the research says, I think maybe Danielle, some of your experience at Pixar actually trying to create that space because organizations reward action orientation. And when we're stressed and overwhelmed, which the majority of us are on a regular basis, according to the research that I've conducted, not just in the US, but globally, put our heads down and we answer those emails till 4:59 when we rush to pick up our kid or take care of a parent and then rush to get back on a call at the end of the day. And so I'm really curious to hear how you kind of think about trying to push against this action orientation to do and do and do, which my research suggests can actually be antithetical to creativity and innovation. So just even thinking that your time is scarce means that you get more done, but create less novel connections between two ideas. You're essentially less innovative. So, how do you think about creating and cultivating a sense of spaciousness?
I guess I'll go to a story, an actual event. So, with the film industry, like many things, is not have as much money. Not as many people go to the theaters these days, and so we've seen the budgets shrinking for our films. And Pixar's art always the sort of self identity is one of innovation and kind of cutting edge. And what many of the people who are the sort of people on the ground, not the executives, but people doing the work, a lot of what people were saying is that they were really worried that having less budgets meant you just had to do the same thing. There was no way to innovate because there was no time. And certainly everything was being tracked more because the budgets were much tighter. And the budgets were getting tight enough that it wasn't like cut a little, it was like cut a lot. And I was on a film at the time where we were kind of earlier on the film, but had the heads of the departments there and maybe a few more people, plus some of the art department story and edit. And I knew that we could do really cool stuff even without a whole bunch of time and money
but how to do that and how to convince people. And so over the lifetime of a film, we have maybe 8 screenings of whatever form it's in. And what usually happens is there's all this work up until the screening, and you show the film, and then the brain trust, the top creative people at Pixar get together and they talk with the director and producer about all the things that are bumping for them in the film and ways they could fix it. And everyone else on the film sits around waiting with great trepidation about what's going to happen, and we don't know what we need to do next because we don't know what the notes are going to be. And so my experience with the day after a screening is it's a lost day. Everybody still is pretending they're doing a lot of work because you're not going to just sit around. So I went to my producer and I said, hey, I want to do this thing. I want to call it Innovation Day. And we're just going to take the day after the screening. No one has a whole lot to do anyways. And I want to just do some, and I can see her eyes glazing over. And she's like, okay, well, I don't know. Talk to me about it later. So I thought that was going to be a slam dunk. Like, I thought she wasn't really paying attention to just say yes. And then she comes back and I said, okay, so are you okay with me doing Innovation Day? She says, I don't know what it is, but I only care about the screen, so do whatever you want. And I was like, great, that's fine. I don't care. So we launched this thing with the crew, and the crew is like about 26 people when you take story and edit out of it because they're caring about the screening. And I said, we're going to do this Innovation Day. We're going to have a little breakfast in the morning, and we're going to spend the day working on whatever project you want. And the next morning, we're all going to present. And there's only 3 rules. And the first rule is it doesn't need to be successful. This success is not part of it. It's really just about the doing. And the next rule is you can use anything. You can use any software. You can use our pipeline, not our pipeline. You can use art supplies. You just let us know what you need. And the third one was, I don't remember what the third one was now. Something similar. Okay, we'll go with that. So I show up that morning and I have no idea. It's not like people are required to participate in this, by the way. They could just sit around and do nothing like normal. And like 10 people come to the breakfast and I'm like, well, okay, well, we got breakfast. It'll be something. And we had kind of a co-working room that some people could come to and a couple people came to that. And then I started hearing from a few more people and then show up the next morning for this. We've sort of allotted 2 hours to show projects and 24 people showed up. And so 2 people didn't do anything and never responded to anything. And 2 people did projects where they ran out of time or one of them didn't work, but they still presented because it wasn't about succeeding. It was just about the doing and sharing ideas. And then we had 22 projects. There were anything from, there was one that was a little bit of a head scratcher from an animator, but that's not so new. But some other ones that went from like, one woman was at home. She admitted she was terrified about this because she couldn't figure out what to do. And then she got clay out. She was taking care of her 3 kids, and her kids made the monster from the movie that I was working on and figured out how would the boil sit on the skin and all this stuff. So there's that end of the spectrum too. This guy who said, and this is the most important thing to me, is he said, yeah, I've been thinking about this for a long time, but I never had time to do it. Now, you can't tell me he didn't actually have time to do it, but what he meant was he never felt justified in trying this thing because he was supposed to be doing all these other things that people told him to do. And the thing he did was take this technology that was used on something else and kind of refigured it and solve this thing that takes weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in simulation on a movie to fix where cloth poked through other cloth. And this thing, he connected it and all the poke-throughs disappeared. And then he looked at our layout person for camera and he said, you could use this same technology to get rid of a crowd's character when they get in the way of your camera instead of searching through a long list of characters that are in the scene. And it was this moment of like, we're overscheduled and we're over prescribed and we have to be sort of doing things all of the time. And in our world, things are very complicated. I had no idea if you could do anything in what amounted to maybe 8 hours. I don't even think people spent 8 hours necessarily. And there were 22 projects that totally said something different. And so at the very least, people had a really enjoyable day, but in a different way. Like we had technology change, we had looks things, and it was all just in one day. And it was pretty magical.
And one of the things to chime in, so not being a filmmaker, but having a front row seat at how these films are made for 12 years, I was so struck by how any person might come in and feel like there's a lot of play going on at Pixar. And one of the things that happens at the beginning of films is that there's a lot of spitballing and lots of wild, crazy, bold ideas. And we ask the question, what if, a lot. And so for example, what if a rat were to make fancy cuisine in Paris? And one of the rules in this creative pursuit is Ed Catmull, and I've seen him in many, many rooms where he had to call a timeout because someone said, well, that'll never make box office, or that's kind of not the kind of idea that's relatable to enough people that it's going to make money. And he had a very strong mandate, is that there's a place for creativity, and that's where the magic happens. And if you talk about putting too much stakes on that, and it has to be a success at the end of the day, then that kills creativity. And so, yes, it's a creative company, and you might be saying, well, I work in healthcare or I work in a bank, but there's so much creativity that goes on in every industry. And I think we need to be really mindful of what is being, when is our efficiency mindset being employed, and when is our creative mindset being employed, because they're two very different processes.
There's a guy. I'm going to say his name. You don't need to remember it. There's a guy. His name is Pierre Bourdieu, and he basically was a scholar, an author, a writer, and he said, when we think about capital, we think about capital in terms of money, financial capital. But he says in any society, there are actually multiple kinds of capital. Financial capital is only one kind of capital. There's also, for example, social capital. Social capital is the capital of connection. It's the capital of who you know. I'm a guy who knows a guy. I'm a guy who can get you a thing. Like I'm a guy who knows a guy. Social capital matters. Who your connections are matter. There's another kind of capital that's called cultural capital. And cultural capital is the capital of things like title, position, so on and so forth, right? Our society invests an awful lot of cultural capital exchange in the idea of being busy. Busyness is one of the foundations of our cultural capital. And so we reward people for how full their calendars are. We reward people for not having time to do other stuff. We reward people for we reward people for doing things, even if those things are neither efficient nor innovative nor necessary. The fact that you're doing a lot of stuff gives you cultural capital. And so the reward structure for busyness has outweighed the necessity that we have for idle time. And I am time waster number one. I'm a professional time waster. Quite literally, my job is to come into your organization and teach you how to waste time better. My specialty area is play. Play is a necessity for the human animal, because work, in the way that humans have designed it, does not exist anywhere else in the animal kingdom. Even animals we think of as working animals don't work the way humans do. Ants aren't looking at their TPS sheets, and like that's not how they function. We create work and then wonder why people are not great at it, because it's a thing that's outside of the natural kingdom. What is natural for higher order primates? Play. Other higher order primates play all the time. They play through their whole lives. It's how animals learn how to be that animal. You watch wolf puppies and they chase each other and they crouch and they pounce on each other, and they learn the skills that they're going to need as adults through play. And guess what? So did you. My PhD, the thing that I study, is material culture, which is the fancy way of saying I study toys. I study what we give to children to teach them to be adults in our society. A child doesn't have the sort of both cognitive capacity or the vocabulary for when you say, tell me about your day. Well, I'm very stressed out because I had a whole, a child doesn't have the capacity to do that, but you sit down with a kid and you give them 2 action figures and you play with them, everything that happened to them today will come out in that session, because as human animals, play is how they orient towards the world. And it was how you oriented towards the world too, until somebody told you it was a waste of time. And for me, what I say is this: time, like anything else, is finite, but that doesn't mean it's short. Just because there's a finite amount of it does not mean it's scarce. And we operate from time scarcity culturally, and then we reward people for operating under time scarcity. So when I come into a space and I say, maybe we should take the first 5 minutes of this meeting and not do any work, people go, well, why would we do that? That's a waste of time. And I go, because if I come in, I slam my folders down on the table and I say, here's what we have to do today, what is the first thing I've done? I've literally wired your brain. I've raised your cortisol levels. I've stressed you out. I've tightened your muscles. I've literally changed your physiology and your orientation towards the task that we're doing. But if I come in and we play for those first 5 minutes, we play a game, and it doesn't have to be anything big. It should just be like 2 truths and a lie for all I care. Like, we could play whatever you want to play. But if we spend that 5 minutes playing a game, all of a sudden, what have I done? I've rewired your brain. Literally, I have set off your endorphins in your brain. I've fired off your neurotransmitters. I've actually reduced your cortisol. I've rewired your brain chemistry so that now you're in a more positive space. You're having fun. You're laughing, which means laughing releases the dopamine centers in your brain. I've done all kinds of things to rewire your brain so that you can work better. I've used play to make you work better. If we want better work at work, we need more time to play. And that is antithetical to a culture that values time.
So this is scary. We're telling everyone to not do the things that culture rewards. One of my heroes, Laurie Santos, shout out, um, reward basically stops on the week that they're going to study time affluence really hard at Yale. She cancels class unbeknownst to students. They show up and she says, "Go away," politely, to try to give them a feeling of time affluence. And because of this idleness aversion, this idea we need to fill every single moment of our day with something productive, otherwise the world might end. Some of them report struggling. So I feel like we should have a bit of a conversation about how to take these ideas into organizational contexts. The ways that I have done it always are in ways that business people can understand. I'm usually working with management consultants, right? So one thing that we do is we will talk about meetings, because guess what? There's a lot of meetings we could subtract out of our calendars to give ourselves some more time. But often, in a very real way, there's something that Leidy Klotz calls kind of like subtraction neglect. When we think about we're really busy and stressed, and we think about trying to solve a problem really hard, we think about adding. Where that shows up in organizations is often meetings. So we think about adding a chat, adding a strategic check-in. And so something that we've done on management teams is we've done calendar deep dives. We just use Microsoft Outlook data, and we just have a conversation, really casual chat about meetings where there's a lot of multitasking, that are large meetings where we can see in the data, but we're not going to say who's doing it, that people are doing other things while they're in that meeting. And we just float the idea. We say, hey, look at that meeting. Anything unusual? And they're like, haha, we're all texting each other during that meeting. And sometimes what happens is that the senior leaders don't realize that their junior employees are still going to that meeting. So in one in management consulting example we showed this multitasking data, and the junior employee looked, or we're like, oh, I thought we were going to that meeting. Like we multitask because we're not sure. It's this large client meeting. I feel like I'm supposed to go because it's in my calendar. And so if it's in my calendar, it must be important. And we need to do all of the things in our calendars all the time to be worthwhile to this organization. And the senior partner looked at that data and realized that they hadn't communicated that that meeting wasn't important. And so there's a lot of pluralistic ignorance that can happen around meetings and processes where we think it's important because it's there, but no one's ever asked this question of why and who's needed and whether it's needed. And so using meetings as a starting point could be one place. But I'd be curious to hear from the group of how you overcome this very real fear that if my time is not spent and accounted for at every single moment in a day, that is going to look like I don't care about my work that I'm doing, that I'm not a productive employee.
I have a story that's an individual story, but I think we can extrapolate to a system. So, one of my favorite coaching clients has a very, very difficult job. He's working for an organization where there have been severe budget cuts, and it's an existential threat to this organization. And I came in one day, and he was perseverating, spinning, and we were getting absolutely nowhere. And he is not one that's likely to be playful or take things off his calendar, much as I've tried to get him to subtract. But in that moment, I said, I don't think we're getting anywhere right now. Would you agree? And he said yes. And so I took a piece of paper and I made a hole in the middle of it. And I said, this is a viewfinder. Let's get up and go out of your office, and we're going to walk outside, and we're going to find things in this viewfinder. And he looked a little skeptical, but I've been working with him for a long time, so there was enough trust that he was willing to leave his office. And we walked around for 20 minutes. He didn't want to go back in his office, but he found leaves that he was looking through with the viewfinder. He's like, Jamie, come here, look at this tree, look at the bark on the tree, look at the blades of grass, how they look when they're encircled by this viewfinder. And I'll stop there. There's more to the story. He had some breakthroughs around how he was seeing the problem, and his imagination was unlocked by a simple 20 minutes with a piece of paper and a circle cut out of it. And he now gives me goosebumps for a moment because he now has this viewfinder on his computer as a reminder of so many things, that you can work your way to solving a problem by squinting harder, by putting more meetings on, by working later at night. And what this serves now as a metaphor is that sometimes the breakthroughs happen when you just get up out of your desk and walk around and look through a piece of paper at a circle that's cut out of it. So I think at Pixar, one of the things that I really enjoyed is most of the directors have, multi-million-dollar budgets on their shoulder and the stress of winning that next Academy Award. It's kind of a thing at Pixar, like, okay, that movie just won the Academy Award, your turn. And I would say that maybe the majority of the directors who I had the good fortune to coach put on their calendar running or playing basketball. One director who makes magnificent films, who we all know and love, and I think it's public that he does this, Pete Docter, who made Inside Out and Soul. He walks for 3 hours and he walks by himself because that's when he has the best ideas. So I think it's more than even science. It's like the emotional knowledge that we have that works. You all know that you've had your breakthrough ideas when you're just stepping away, when you're walking, when you're even taking a shower. Like, what are we doing? These back-to-back calendars and Zoom meetings back-to-back is just madness.
I'm stressed out about. I'm stressed out. Hello? Okay. I'm stressed out about my microphone, but I'm also keep looking at my watch because we only have half an hour.
Time stress.
Oh,
Should we give them?
oh, you
some
didn't
time
notice
to
the big
reflect?
red numbers in the back that are a countdown clock to Armageddon?
It's all making us very time stressed up here, by the way.
Because
My
I
research
did.
suggests in
5,
future don't do
4.
that.
And here's the thing. I look up and I go, oh, we have 2 minutes, which is very different than being like, oh, we have 2 minutes, right? Wait, 2 minutes is long. 2 minutes is a long time. You don't think 2 minutes is long? That was 10 seconds. Look how uncomfortable you are. Look how uncomfortable you are. 10 seconds. 2 minutes is a long time. And this is the point that we're trying to make today, is that we act like time is so scarce, and it's not. You are uncomfortable with 10 seconds of silence. 10 seconds. Think about what that says about us as a culture, about what we value as a people, about how we have need to fill up space with stuff. We just have to fill it up. And there's value in not doing that. There's real value in allowing yourself space for idleness, space to do nothing, space to just be, space to just be. You know, at the beginning of this, I said, how would you spend this 40 minutes that you gave up to do this? How would you have spent this time? Really think about that and ask yourself if that thing that you were doing was really as valuable as the 40 minutes you spent doing this thing that you did today that was kind of a waste of time, but a waste of time in the best of ways. Thanks for playing with us this afternoon.